Hi, enjoy listening. Valerie Parker sat by the living room window, her fingers tracing the cold glass without realizing it. The courtyard below looked so ordinary. Children rode bikes. A neighbour carried groceries. Someone's dog barked at nothing in particular. And yet, for Valerie, that little square of cracked pavement was a graveyard. It was where her husband, Chris, had fallen. A year had passed since that night. Chris had been on his way home, carrying a bouquet of lilies and a small velvet box he picked up after work. Their third wedding anniversary. Valerie had been in the kitchen, setting the table, when her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was a police officer, clinical but gentle. "Ma'am, there's been an incident." The rest blurred together. Later, a detective explained that Chris had been followed from the jewelry store. Two men saw him flash cash, saw the velvet box, and decided he'd be an easy target. The bouquet was trampled on the sidewalk, the ring found in one thief's pocket. Chris didn't make it to the hospital. Valerie never opened the box. The court returned the ring after the trial, but she couldn't even bear to look at it. It sat buried somewhere in her closet, wrapped in the evidence bag it had come in. And then only weeks later, she'd lost the baby, 4 months along. Her entire world had collapsed in less than a season. She had cut herself off since. She quit her office job, finding remote work as a copy editor, something that kept her behind a laptop all day. She avoided calls. The only person she hadn't pushed away was Natalie Green, her oldest friend since college. Natalie didn't pry. She'd show up sometimes with coffee or coax Valerie out for a short walk, but never pressed too hard. That was the only reason Valerie could still answer her calls. This evening, as she sat at the window with tears pressing hot behind her eyes, her phone buzzed again. Natalie's name lit up the screen. "Hey, Val." Natalie's voice was unusually chipper. "So, don't be mad, but I'm standing outside your building. I've got a cake, a bottle of champagne, and I'm about 2 seconds away from crying because my best friend completely forgot it's my birthday." Valerie's breath caught. "Oh, Nat!" She covered her mouth with her hand. She had forgotten. She hadn't even looked at the calendar in weeks. "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry," she stammered, already pushing herself up from the couch. "Give me 2 minutes. I'm coming down." She didn't just buzz Natalie in. She practically ran down the stairs, heart pounding with shame. When she opened the door, Natalie stood there in her red coat, smiling smugly and holding a bakery box in one hand, a chilled bottle in the other. "You should have seen your face." Natalie laughed once they were upstairs, the cake now on the table. "Like I'd just caught you robbing a bank. But honestly, Val, you're not allowed to miss my birthday. That's the one holiday I care about." Valerie tried to smile, though guilt clung to her. "I don't know what's wrong with me. I keep thinking it'll get easier with time, but it feels worse, like the walls are closing in. Sometimes I wonder if I'm losing my mind." Natalie tapped her fingers on the table thoughtfully. She'd heard this tone before, hopeless, detached. "You need a change of scenery, Val. A real one. Not just a walk around the block." Valerie sighed. "I've thought about that. A vacation maybe, but you always have to come back. Back to this window, this courtyard, and the memories. What if?" Natalie leaned forward, lowering her voice. "You didn't have to come back." Valerie frowned. "What do you mean?" I mean moving. Selling this place. Starting fresh somewhere new. I know, it sounds extreme, but think about it. People are moving out of the city all the time. Remote jobs, cheaper houses, more space. You could actually breathe again. Valerie shook her head immediately. Nat, no one's going to pay decent money for this apartment. And even if they did, what could I buy? Some crumbling shack? Not necessarily, Natalie said. Her realtor's instincts kicked in. There are exchanges, city apartments for countryside homes. I've seen it happen. You'd be surprised. Nice places, with internet, modern plumbing, the works. Not like Little House on the Prairie. And you, she pointed her fork at Valerie, could finally stop staring at that courtyard. Valerie laughed softly, the first real laugh in weeks. Me, living in some village, planting tomatoes? Why not? Natalie grinned. You'd have a garden, maybe a hammock. I'd come visit. Hell, I'd bring champagne every time. Valerie rolled her eyes, but the thought lingered. It felt absurd, yet strangely tempting. 3 months later, she found herself standing in front of a small white farmhouse on the edge of a quiet Midwestern town, suitcase in hand, wondering if she had finally lost her mind. The farmhouse looked like something from a postcard. White siding, dark green shutters, a small porch with a swing that creaked in the wind. It wasn't big, but it was cared for, the kind of home someone had loved. A flower bed hugged the front steps, though the blooms had long since gone. Valerie stood with her suitcase and exhaled. What am I doing here? Natalie had handled most of the logistics, calling in favours, arranging the exchange. The house had belonged to an older woman, Andrew Dawson, who had recently moved in with her daughter after her health declined. That daughter wanted money fast, so she sold the house through Natalie's agency. A practical transaction, but for Valerie it felt surreal. The inside smelled faintly of cedar and something sweet, like cookies baked months ago, lingering in the wood. Furniture was minimal. A worn sofa, a heavy oak table, a couple of chairs. Boxes sat in the corner, filled with dishes and old books. Valerie dropped her suitcase and looked around. It would take weeks to make the space feel hers, but there was potential. She could almost imagine herself curled up with her laptop by the window, or drinking coffee on the porch at sunrise. She spent the first day unpacking and rearranging what little furniture she had shipped from the city. By evening, exhaustion wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. She collapsed onto the bed without even pulling the quilt up, and sleep came quickly. But in the middle of the night, a noise woke her. A creak, then another. Valerie froze. Her heart beat against her ribs as she held her breath, listening. The farmhouse was old, wood settling, pipes knocking, she told herself. But this sound was different, sharp, deliberate, almost like footsteps. She slid out of bed, grabbing the nearest thing that could serve as a weapon, the fireplace poker she hadn't yet used. The noise came again, from above. The attic, swallowing hard. Valerie climbed the narrow staircase. The air grew cooler the higher she went, until she reached the small attic door. She pushed it open, her phone flashlight cutting through the dark. Her breath caught. 2 faces stared back at her. Children. A boy, maybe 10, standing in front protectively, and a girl, smaller, no more than 7, clinging to his arm. Their eyes were wide with fear. "Please," the boy said quickly, his voice shaking but firm. "We didn't take anything. Don't call the police. Don't send us back." The girl started crying silently, burying her face in his shirt. Valerie blinked, lowering the poker slightly. "Back? Back where?" "The foster place," the boy whispered. "We don't want to go. We just needed somewhere to stay." Her mind raced. Natalie had mentioned something vague about kids connected to the old owner. Could these be? Valerie's voice softened. "What are your names?" "I'm Mikey. This is my sister, Katie." His small jaw tightened. "We can leave if you want. Just please don't call them." Valerie's heart cracked. They looked half-starved, cheeks smudged with dirt, eyes too old for their age. She lowered the flashlight beam. "You don't need to leave right now. Come downstairs. I'll make something to eat." Mikey hesitated, then gave a barely there nod. He took Katie's hand, and together they crept down the stairs behind Valerie, their bare feet whispering against the wood. In the kitchen, Valerie pulled out bread, peanut butter, apples, anything quick. The kids devoured the food as though they hadn't eaten in days. As they ate, bits of their story came out. Their parents, Sophia and her husband, had died in a car accident years ago. They'd lived with their grandmother, Evelyn, until she became too sick to care for them. Evelyn's daughter, an aunt they barely knew, took Evelyn in but refused to take the kids. Instead, they were sent to foster. Katie hadn't spoken a word since. Trauma had stolen her voice. Valerie sat at the table, hands wrapped around a cooling mug of tea. None of this made sense. 2 children, abandoned, hiding in her attic? She should call someone. That was the logical thing. But when she looked at Mikey's defiant eyes and Katie's trembling shoulders, logic faltered. "All right," Valerie said quietly. "You can stay here tonight. We'll figure things out in the morning." For the first time, Mikey's face softened, relief flickering across it. Valerie lay awake long after the children had curled up on the small couch, wondering what she had just gotten herself into. By morning, Valerie almost convinced herself she'd dreamed the whole thing. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window, scattering gold across the table, and the quiet seemed too ordinary for what had happened the night before. But then she saw them, Mikey and Katie, curled up on the couch, tangled in the old quilt she'd found in the closet. Mikey stirred first, blinking at her, still wary. Katie slept on, her face pressed against his shoulder. "Morning," Valerie said softly. "Morning," he muttered back, voice gravelly from sleep. She made pancakes, figuring kids liked pancakes. Mikey ate cautiously at first, then quickly, as though afraid the food might vanish. Katie picked at hers, silent as ever, her big eyes darting from Valerie to her brother. Before Valerie could ask more questions, a sharp knock rattled the front door. She froze. Mikey went rigid, his fork clattering onto the plate. Katie instinctively pressed herself against him. "It's okay," Valerie whispered, rising from the table. "Probably just a neighbor." 2 women stood outside, one tall and thin, the other short with a round face and kind eyes. They carried a basket between them. "You must be Valerie," the shorter one said brightly. "I'm Mrs. Carter. This is Mrs. Whitfield. We live just down the road. Thought we'd come welcome you to the neighborhood. Valerie managed a smile and invited them in. She tried to keep her body angled so the couch and the kids were out of sight. But as soon as the women stepped into the living room, their eyes fell on Mikey and Katie. The basket slipped slightly in Mrs. Carter's hands. "Oh dear," she murmured. "It's them again." Valerie blinked. You know them?" Mrs. Whitfield sighed heavily, lowering herself into a chair as though the weight of years pressed down on her shoulders. "Everyone around here knows the Dawson children. Poor things." Over cups of tea, the story unfolded. Evelyn Dawson, the former owner of the house, had once been strong and lively, but illness had taken her mobility. Her daughter, the children's aunt, had little patience. When Evelyn could no longer care for Mikey and Katie after their parents' death, the daughter shipped them off to foster care. "The thing is," Mrs. Carter whispered, leaning forward, "this house, this very house, is where the children grew up. Their toys were in that yard, their pictures on those walls. They don't understand why they weren't wanted anymore." Valerie's throat tightened. She glanced at the kids, Mikey trying to appear indifferent, Katie shrinking deeper into the couch. Mrs. Whitfield shook her head. "Breaks your heart. Their grandmother adored them, but she was too sick. The daughter just wanted to sell this place for money." "Are they legally still tied to the house?" Valerie asked carefully. "Not exactly," Mrs. Carter said. "The deed was in Evelyn's name. When she moved in with her daughter, the daughter had her sign the sale papers. But those kids," she looked at Valerie meaningfully, "those kids are part of this place. It's theirs in every way but on paper." Silence lingered. Valerie's mind spun. The law said one thing, her heart said another. Mrs. Whitfield finally added, "There is someone else. Andrew Dawson, Evelyn's stepson from her second marriage. He left years ago. Angry at his father, angry at Evelyn, angry at the world. But he came back for a day when Sophia, the children's mother, died. Left some money with Evelyn, then disappeared again. Last we heard, he lives in the city." Valerie tucked the name away. Andrew Dawson. A thread, thin but real. The women eventually left, promising to stop by with more food and offering help if Valerie needed anything. As soon as the door closed, Mikey burst out, "You're not going to call the foster people, are you?" Valerie looked at him, at Katie's wide, pleading eyes, at the fear that hung in the air like smoke. "No," she said firmly. "Not today." For the first time, Mikey let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. But Valerie knew this was only the beginning. That night, after the kids had finally drifted off on the couch, Valerie sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, her tea long gone cold. The house creaked around her, the silence broken only by the steady hum of the refrigerator. Andrew Dawson. She couldn't shake the name Mrs. Whitfield had mentioned. If anyone in the family could, or would, step up, maybe it was him. Maybe. Valerie typed into the search bar, her fingers hesitant. Andrew Dawson wasn't exactly an uncommon name. Hundreds of profiles filled the screen. LinkedIn pages, Facebook accounts, Twitter handles. She narrowed it by state, then by city. A few clicks later, One profile caught her attention. The man in the picture looked mid-30s, maybe a little older. Sharp jawline, tired eyes. His bio was sparse, just his job as a mechanic at an auto shop in Renshaw. A city a couple of hours away. Valerie studied the photo. There was something in the set of his eyes, the guarded expression, that reminded her of Mikey. She hesitated before sending a message. How did you even begin something like this? Hi, my name is Valerie Parker. I recently purchased your stepmother Evelyn's old house. 2 children, Mikey and Katie Dawson, are staying here. They told me about their situation. I think we should talk. She read it 3 times before hitting send. No response. An hour passed, then another. She checked the couch. Mikey was curled protectively around Katie, who slept soundlessly. Just when she was about to shut the laptop, a notification pinged. A reply. This isn't funny. Who the hell are you? Valerie's chest tightened. She quickly typed back. I'm not joking. They're here. They found their way into the house. They're scared. I don't know what to do, but they need family. The typing bubble blinked, then stopped, then blinked again. Finally, a response. I can't deal with this. Not my problem. Valerie's heart sank. She started to close the laptop, but another message appeared. Wait, are they okay? She exhaled, fingers flying. Hungry, scared. Katie hasn't spoken a word, but they're safe for now. There was a long pause. Then, I'll come. Tomorrow. Valerie stared at the screen. Relief and dread twisted together in her chest. The next day, just before noon, a dusty blue pickup pulled into the gravel drive. A tall man climbed out, shoulders broad beneath a worn flannel, his expression unreadable. His eyes, tired, wary, searching, swept over the house before landing on Valerie. You're her? He asked flatly. I'm Valerie, she said, wiping her palms on her jeans. You must be Andrew. He gave a curt nod, then his gaze shifted. Behind Valerie, Mikey had appeared in the doorway, Katie clutching his arm. The hardness in Andrew's face flickered. God, he muttered. For a moment, no one moved. Mikey's eyes narrowed suspiciously, protective of his sister. Katie's fingers dug into his sleeve. Finally, Andrew cleared his throat, stepping closer. His voice was rough, almost choked. Hey, kid, you look just like your mum. Katie buried her face again. Mikey didn't answer. Valerie could feel the tension, thick as rope. Andrew looked at her, his jaw clenched. Can we talk? Alone? She nodded, leading him into the kitchen. For a long time he just stood there, staring at the floor. Then he spoke. I walked away years ago. From all of them. My dad, Evelyn, my stepsister. I was angry, and I thought leaving would make it easier. But it didn't. I missed everything. Now, he trailed off, shaking his head. Now it's too late. Valerie studied him. He looked haunted, carrying ghosts that weren't hers to carry. It's not too late, she said gently. They need someone, and whether you want to admit it or not, you're the closest thing they've got. Andrew lifted his eyes to hers. For the first time, she saw not just anger, but deep, aching regret. He exhaled slowly. Then tell me what to do. Andrew stayed longer than Valerie expected. At first, he was distant, almost awkward in his own skin. He kept his voice low, his movements careful, as if afraid to spook the kids. Mikey, however, was on guard. He sat across the table from Andrew with his arms crossed, shoulders squared like a miniature soldier. Katie barely left his side, her little hand clinging to his shirt as if he might vanish. "So," Andrew tried, his voice rough. "You like baseball?" Mikey gave a shrug that said, "Don't bother." "What about fishing?" Another shrug. Andrew let out a humorless chuckle. "All right, guess I deserved that." Valerie watched from the kitchen counter, arms folded. She wanted to step in, but something told her to let them circle each other first. Finally, Mikey broke the silence. "Why didn't you come before?" The words were sharp, older than his years. Katie's eyes lifted, wide and questioning. Andrew swallowed hard. He didn't look at Valerie. He looked straight at the boy. "I was angry. At everyone. At things that weren't even your fault. I thought if I left, I could forget. But I couldn't." He ran a hand over his face. "Doesn't make it right. I let you down." Mikey's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Katie, though, leaned forward slightly, studying Andrew as if searching for truth in his face. That evening, when the kids had gone to bed, Andrew lingered in the kitchen. Valerie poured tea, sliding a mug toward him. "You handled that better than I thought you would," she said. Andrew gave a hollow laugh. "You mean I didn't run out the door?" She tilted her head. "Something like that." He took a sip, staring into the steam. "I don't know if I can do this. I don't know how to be what they need." "None of us know until we're in it," Valerie replied softly. "But you showed up. That's more than most." His eyes lifted to hers then, tired but searching, as if her words had scratched something raw inside him. For a moment, she felt a spark of connection, dangerous in its warmth. The days that followed were a test of patience and small victories. Andrew fixed the broken porch swing, and Mikey, after much sulking, helped hold the nails. They didn't talk much, but it was the first time Mikey didn't glare at him outright. Katie remained quiet, her voice locked away. But one afternoon, when Andrew handed her a little carved wooden bird he'd whittled in the yard, she actually smiled. Just a flicker, but it was there. Valerie noticed everything. She noticed how Andrew's rough edges softened around the kids, how Mikey began watching him out of the corner of his eye, curiosity breaking through suspicion. How Katie sometimes let go of her brother's shirt when Andrew was nearby. She also noticed how the house felt different with him there. Not just busier, but fuller, like the air itself was shifting. Late one evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Andrew stayed behind again. He leaned against the counter, his shoulders heavy. "I keep thinking about Evelyn," he said quietly. "She did everything for those kids when she was sick herself. And I couldn't even be bothered to write a letter. I just kept telling myself it wasn't my responsibility. Now look." Valerie reached for her mug, choosing her words carefully. "Regret can eat you alive, but it doesn't change the past. What you do now, that's what matters." Andrew studied her, the corner of his mouth twitching as if a smile almost broke through. "You always talk like that?" "Like what? Like you've actually figured life out?" Valerie let out a soft laugh. "Trust me, I haven't." But when their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement that both carried scars. Both were trying to stitch something broken back together. Neither said it out loud, but in that quiet kitchen, the foundation of a new kind of family was beginning to form. For a little while, things almost felt normal. Mornings with cereal bowls clinking, afternoons fixing up the garden, evenings spent with Mikey begrudgingly helping Andrew in the shed. Katie even began humming to herself, quiet little notes when she thought no one was listening. But small towns never stayed quiet for long. It started with Mrs. Whitfield from next door. She'd stopped by to drop off cookies, but her sharp eyes lingered too long on the kids' shoes by the door, on Andrew's truck in the driveway. "You've got quite the full house, Valerie," she remarked, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just helping out," Valerie answered, keeping her tone light. Mrs. Whitfield tilted her head. "I just hope you've got everything in order. Folks talk, you know." Valerie closed the door with a polite smile, but her stomach twisted. She knew what that meant. Sure enough, a week later, there was a knock at the door. This one firmer, official. Valerie opened it to find a woman in a grey blazer holding a folder against her chest. "Ms. Parker? I'm with Child and Family Services. We received a call about 2 minors living here." Behind Valerie, Mikey froze in the hallway. Katie clutched his hand like a lifeline. "Everything's fine," Valerie said quickly, forcing calm into her voice. "They're safe here." "I'm sure," the woman said with professional neutrality, though her eyes flicked past Valerie's shoulder, assessing. "But I'll need to speak with you and the children." Andrew appeared then, coming in from the yard, sweat darkening his flannel. His presence filled the doorway, protective and tense. "They don't need strangers poking around," the caseworker straightened. "And you are?" "Andrew Dawson, their family." That gave her pause. "The half-brother?" Andrew's jaw tightened. "Yeah, that's me." Valerie felt the air shift. Andrew's claim wasn't just a defense, it was a declaration. That night, after the caseworker left with promises to follow up soon, Valerie and Andrew sat at the table in silence. The kids had gone to bed early, shaken. Finally, Valerie spoke. "You didn't have to say that, about being their family." Andrew rubbed the back of his neck. "Didn't I? Because that's what I am, or should be." She studied him. There was a fire in his eyes now, something stronger than the guilt she'd first seen. "You're serious," she said softly. He nodded. "I've wasted years running. But when I saw that woman at the door, saw how scared they were, I knew. I can't walk away again. I won't." Valerie's chest tightened. "Andrew, the system doesn't just hand custody over. It's a process. Courts, evaluations, proving you can provide." "I'll do whatever it takes," he said firmly. Then, after a pause, he looked straight at her. "But I can't do it alone. I need your help." The weight of his words settled between them. Valerie felt it like a stone in her chest. Because part of her wanted to say yes, wanted to believe in this fragile hope. But she also knew what it would mean. Getting tangled deeper, putting her heart on the line. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Inside, the silence stretched until finally, Valerie whispered, "All right, we'll fight for them, together." Andrew exhaled, relief flickering across his face. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked less like a man haunted and more like a man who had something worth staying for. The paperwork was thicker than Andrew expected. Forms, affidavits, financial statements, proof of employment, proof of housing, proof of stability. Words that seemed designed to remind him of every failure. He sat at Valerie's kitchen table, sleeves rolled up, pencil tapping against the lines he couldn't quite fill. "Employer history?" he muttered under his breath. "What do I even put here? Odd jobs? Running away from responsibility?" Valerie reached over, steadying his restless hand. "You've been working steady the last 6 months, right? Construction site, then roofing?" "Yeah," he sighed. "But before that?" She gave him a look. "Don't sabotage yourself before we've even started. Just be honest. You've changed. Let them see that." Andrew nodded, though doubt flickered in his eyes. The hardest part wasn't the paperwork. It was watching the kids go through the system. Mikey sat stiff-backed during his interview, his answers clipped. "Do you feel safe here?" the caseworker asked. "Yes." "Do you feel cared for?" "Yes." "Would you rather live somewhere else?" "No." The woman wrote notes anyway, her face unreadable. Katie's interview was worse. She stayed silent, clutching her stuffed rabbit, eyes wide with fear. When pressed, she only whispered, "I want to stay with Val." That night, Mikey stormed into the kitchen. "Why do we have to answer their stupid questions? We're fine here. They don't care about us. They just want to take us away." Andrew crouched down, meeting his eyes. "I know it feels that way, but this is how we prove you belong here. With me, with Valerie. We have to play their game." Mikey's lips trembled, anger and fear mixing. "What if they don't believe us?" Andrew swallowed hard. "Then we fight harder." Valerie stood at the doorway, her chest aching at the sight. Andrew kneeling there, trying to be steady when she could see the cracks in him. Weeks blurred into a cycle of forms, meetings, court dates. The caseworker seemed unimpressed with Andrew's past. Though Valerie noticed, she always scribbled more notes when Valerie spoke up about the kids' progress. But the gossip in town didn't help. People whispered in the grocery store, questioned Valerie at church. "Taking on someone else's children," they said. "Living with a man like Andrew Dawson after all he's done." One evening, when the kids were asleep, Valerie sat across from Andrew at the table. The exhaustion in his face mirrored her own. "You know what people are saying about me?" she asked quietly. Andrew's jaw tightened. "Let them talk. It's not that simple." She twisted her tea mug in her hands. "If this goes wrong, I could lose everything I've built. My reputation, my job, even my home." He leaned forward, his voice low, rough with something raw. "I know what I'm asking of you. More than I have any right to. But Valerie, I swear to you, I won't run this time. If they give me the chance, I'll be there for those kids every day. And if you stand with me, I'll never forget it." For a long moment, she searched his face. And though part of her wanted to stay guarded, she couldn't ignore the truth that had taken root. She was already in too deep. The first court hearing was scheduled for early spring. Andrew wore a borrowed suit, shoulders too broad for the jacket. Valerie sat beside him in the wooden pew, their hands brushing once, briefly, before the judge entered. As the gavel struck, Mikey and Katie watched from the bench behind them, two small figures caught in the storm of grown-up decisions. Valerie inhaled slowly, steeling herself. This was no longer just Andrew's fight. It was hers too. The courthouse felt colder the second time. The walls seemed taller, the voices sharper. Andrew sat stiffly at the defendant's table, eyes fixed forward. Valerie sat beside him, close enough to feel the tension radiating from him like heat. The caseworker read her report in a flat tone. Mr. Dawson has made strides towards stability. However, his history of instability and prior criminal record remain concerns. The children have expressed a strong desire to remain with Ms. Parker, who has provided a safe and structured environment. Andrew clenched his fists. Valerie placed a quiet hand over his knuckles, grounding him. The judge adjusted his glasses. We'll need to hear from both parties in more depth before making any determinations. Then the door at the back opened. A man in a dark jacket entered, head lowered until he took his seat on the opposite bench. Andrew froze, his breath caught, jaw locking tight. Valerie noticed immediately. "Who is that?" she whispered. Andrew's voice was low, flat. "My father." Thomas Dawson hadn't been part of Andrew's life for years. Not since Andrew had walked out of that house with nothing but anger in his chest. But now he sat calmly across the aisle, nodding politely to the judge, speaking with smooth precision when called upon. "I believe the children would benefit from stability," Thomas said. "Andrew has always been impulsive. He struggled with discipline and commitment. I should know. I raised him." The words hit Andrew like blows. He wanted to stand, to shout, but Valerie's hand pressed firmly against his arm. "Not here. Not now." The judge listened, pen scratching notes. To anyone else, Thomas sounded credible, measured. A responsible man, concerned for the children's well-being. Valerie, though, saw what lurked beneath his polished words. She saw the flicker in Andrew's eyes, the way his shoulders coiled as if bracing for old pain. That night, after the hearing adjourned, Andrew stormed outside, pacing the courthouse steps. Of course he showed up. Can't stand the idea of me doing something right. He'll drag me through the mud if it means keeping me under his thumb. Valerie followed quietly. "Andrew, is he trying to take custody?" Andrew laughed bitterly. "Wouldn't put it past him. He doesn't care about Mikey or Katie. He just wants control. Always has." His hands trembled as he lit a cigarette, then tossed it away before even taking a drag. "God, I can't do this. Not against him." Valerie stepped closer, catching his gaze. "Yes, you can. Because this time you're not fighting alone." For a moment, the storm inside him broke. He looked at her, not with defiance, but with something softer, more vulnerable. "Why do you care so much, Valerie? Why put yourself through this?" Her breath caught. She could have said it was for the kids, for justice, for the principle of it. But none of those reasons felt whole. Instead, she said the truth that had been growing inside her. Because I believe in you. And maybe because I need you too. The words hung between them, dangerous and fragile. Andrew swallowed hard, his eyes darkening with emotion he didn't dare name. Before either of them could speak again, Mikey's voice called from the car. "Are we going home or what?" The moment shattered, but the echo of it lingered. That night, Valerie lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She replayed Andrew's father's words, the way they'd cut into Andrew's confidence. But she also replayed her own confession, the way Andrew had looked at her when she'd said it. Somewhere between duty and love, she realized, a line had already been crossed. The courtroom was silent when the final hearing began. The children sat with Valerie in the back row, their small hands clasped tightly together. Andrew sat at the front, shoulders squared but tense, his jaw locked, as though bracing for impact. Across the aisle, Thomas Dawson waited with his lawyer, wearing the same polished calm he'd carried through every proceeding. The judge cleared his throat. "This case has been complex. The question is not whether Mr. Dawson loves these children. That much is clear. The question is whether he can provide the stability they need." Andrew's pulse hammered. Every muscle in his body urged him to stand, to defend himself. But today wasn't about fighting. Today was about proving he had changed. When the judge called on him to speak, Andrew rose slowly. His voice shook at first, then steadied. "I've made mistakes. More than I can count. I've run from responsibility, from people who cared about me. But when I came back here, and I saw Mikey and Katie..." He glanced toward them, his voice breaking. "I knew I couldn't run anymore. They deserve better. And I swear, if you give me the chance, I'll spend the rest of my life being better for them." He turned slightly, his eyes finding Valerie's. "I can't promise I won't stumble, but I can promise I won't walk away." The judge listened intently, then nodded. Thomas Dawson stood next. His words were crisp, calculated. "Your Honor, my son's words are touching, but they don't erase years of recklessness. These children need a steady hand, not lofty promises. I can provide that hand." The courtroom seemed to tilt. Valerie felt Mikey's grip tighten around her arm. Finally, the judge spoke. "Having considered the testimony, the reports, and the best interests of the children, the court rules as follows. Custody will be granted to Andrew Dawson under supervision and with ongoing evaluation. The children may continue to reside primarily in the home of Ms. Valerie Parker, with whom they have clearly established strong bonds. Mr. Dawson is to remain directly involved in their care and upbringing." For a heartbeat, silence. Then Katie let out a small, relieved sob and buried her face against Valerie. Mikey leaned back, exhaling as though he'd been holding his breath for days. Andrew closed his eyes. When he opened them, tears brimmed but did not fall. He looked at Valerie, and in that look was everything he couldn't say in front of a judge. Gratitude, hope, and something deeper. Something that went beyond family. Outside, spring sunlight poured across the courthouse steps. Andrew knelt before the kids. "We did it," he whispered. Mikey scowled, but it was all bravado. "Yeah, you better not screw it up." Andrew smiled faintly. "Fair enough." Katie climbed into his arms, her small hands clutching his collar. "Don't go away again," his voice caught. "Never." Valerie stood nearby, watching them, her heart both heavy and light. When Andrew finally turned toward her, she saw a man no longer defined by failure, but by the fight he was willing to make, for his children, for himself, and maybe for her. He stepped closer. For once, he didn't try to hide the tremor in his voice. "I couldn't have done this without you." She met his gaze steadily. "You didn't have to. That's what family is." And as the four of them walked down the courthouse steps together, the future ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time, it was theirs. If you like the story, I would be very happy to have your support. Click the thumbs up. And to not miss new stories, subscribe and click on the bell. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and all the best.